When Queen Elizabeth I took her final breath, England didn't just lose a monarch, it lost its mystery. For 45 years she ruled alone, no husband, no heir, no named successor. Her life was a fortress built from iron willpower, whispered secrets, and flawless presentation. But then came the silence. After her death at Richmond Palace in 1603, her closest advisers entered her private chambers. They expected the predictable, royal decrees, glittering jewels, perhaps a few private letters or religious texts. But instead, they found a single letter. No seal, no addressee, no signature. Just there, waiting. And what they read inside stopped them cold. Not a word was spoken, not a gesture made. It was as if time itself paused to listen. What could have been written in that letter? A confession of guilt? A warning from a dying queen? Or something far darker? A truth she had carried in silence for decades? Some say it named an heir, a final act of duty in private. Others believe it was a reflection, an intimate, devastating window into the mind of a woman who had ruled through love denied and enemies disguised as friends. But one theory chills the blood more than any other. What if the letter held her final acknowledgement that the flawless face she presented to the world, painted in lead and lined in mercury, had been killing her all along, that the very image that defined her reign was also her quiet undoing? To know what Elizabeth may have written in that moment, we must go back. To understand the mystery, we must first understand the girl behind the crown, the daughter of a beheaded queen, the child of a king who abandoned her, the woman who built an empire while denying herself a life. This is not just the story of a monarch, it's the story of what it costs to become legend. And somewhere in the shadows of that cost lies the letter. To find its meaning, we begin not with power, but with pain. The year was 1533, and the storm was already brewing. Elizabeth Tudor entered the world not with celebration, but with suspicion. It was September 7th, 1533. England was in chaos, and at the center of the firestorm was her mother, Anne Boleyn. Anne was everything a proper woman wasn't supposed to be. Bold, opinionated, irresistibly ambitious. She didn't just catch the king's eye, she made him burn. Henry VIII didn't simply fall in love. He tore his kingdom apart to have her. He broke from the Catholic Church, abandoned his queen of 20 years, Catherine of Aragon, and declared Anne his lawful wife, all for one reason: he believed Anne would give him a son. But when she gave birth to a daughter, Elizabeth, the king's dreams soured overnight. Instead of celebration, there was disappointment. Instead of pride, there was silence. For a brief moment, Anne tried to hold her ground. She poured her energy into raising Elizabeth, preparing her as if she could still matter. But Henry was already slipping away. His eyes were wandering. His rage was growing. 3 years later, Anne Boleyn was arrested. She was charged with adultery, incest, and high treason. The charges were almost certainly false, fabricated by enemies at court. But truth didn't matter in Tudor England. Only power did. On May 19th, 1536, Anne was executed by a French swordsman. It was quick, precise, and brutally final. Elizabeth was just 2 years old. She never saw her mother again. But the world would never let her forget what her mother had been accused of. Worse. Still, just 11 days after Anne's death, Henry remarried. To Jane Seymour, a quiet, obedient noblewoman who would finally give him what he wanted, a son. Prince Edward, the golden heir. From that moment on, Elizabeth was not the cherished daughter of a king. She was a living reminder of a queen he wanted, erased. She was declared illegitimate, her royal status stripped, her future uncertain. And yet, even then, Elizabeth didn't break. She watched, she listened, she endured. She grew up in a world where love was transactional, loyalty was lethal, and women were expendable. And it's in that crucible of betrayal, blood, and abandonment that a future queen was born. Before she ever wore a crown, she wore the weight of history. Not just her father's ambition, but her mother's shadow. The girl no one wanted was already becoming the woman no one would forget. After her mother's execution and her father's Cold rejection. Elizabeth wasn't just left behind, she was left unprotected. The royal court was a battlefield where smiles were weapons and loyalty could kill you. And Elizabeth, daughter of a disgraced queen, had no allies. She was neither fully royal nor fully forgotten, just enough of both to be dangerous. She moved from household to household, living under the rule of her stepmothers, watching as one died from childbirth, another was exiled, and one, Catherine Howard, was executed just like her mother. By the time Elizabeth was 10, she had seen what power did to women. It crowned them in diamonds, then crushed them in blood. But she didn't rage. She watched. She learned the game better than anyone. She became fluent in silence, expert at reading people. She mastered Latin, Greek, French, and Italian. She studied history, politics, and philosophy, not for curiosity, but for survival. Every word she spoke was measured, every friendship calculated, because Elizabeth knew one wrong move, one misplaced trust, and her head could end up on the same scaffold as her mother's. Even her relationship with her younger brother, Edward VI, the son Henry had longed for, was complicated. He was king in name, but the real power belonged to the men behind him. And those men feared Elizabeth's intellect, her lineage, and her potential. When Edward died young, the question of succession threw the country into chaos. Elizabeth's half-sister Mary, daughter of Catherine of Aragon, took the throne. Mary Tudor, known as Bloody Mary, was a devout Catholic who viewed Elizabeth, a Protestant, and the child of Anne Boleyn, as a heretic and a threat. Elizabeth was imprisoned in the Tower of London, the same tower where her mother had awaited execution. For 2 terrifying months she didn't know if she would live or die, but she kept her composure. She said nothing foolish, signed nothing incriminating, and when she was finally released, she didn't protest. She didn't complain. She survived. When Mary died in 1558, Elizabeth was 25 years old. She emerged not as a victim, but as a master, a woman who had learned through agony and exile how to wear silence like a crown. When Elizabeth finally became queen in 1558, the country held its breath. She wasn't just inheriting a throne, she was inheriting a nation torn by religious violence, fractured loyalties, and fresh memories of executions. England was wounded, its people were exhausted, and standing before them was a young woman many had once written off as a bastard child. But Elizabeth had learned how to transform perception into power. From the very beginning, she mastered the art of royal theatre. Every speech, every portrait, every procession was designed to make the people forget what they feared and believe in what she promised: unity, peace, strength. But she also knew that in a world dominated by men, image was everything. In the 16th century, a queen's appearance wasn't just vanity, it was policy. Beauty meant power. Pale skin symbolized purity, nobility, even divinity. The whiter your skin, the higher your status, and no one embodied this more than Elizabeth. Her signature look, porcelain white face, crimson lips, high forehead, wasn't just iconic, it was strategic. But this image came at a cost. In 1562, just 4 years into her reign, Elizabeth was struck by smallpox. She survived, barely. But it left her face permanently scarred and her hair thinning. For a queen whose legitimacy was already questioned, these imperfections weren't just cosmetic, they were dangerous. So Elizabeth built a new mask. She turned to Venetian ceruse, a cosmetic made of white lead and vinegar. It gave her a smooth, ghostly complexion, hiding the pockmarks and presenting an almost supernatural glow. It worked. The public saw a flawless queen, ethereal, untouchable, a monarch who never aged. But beneath that alabaster armor, poison was seeping in. Ceruse was toxic. Applied daily, it corroded the skin. Over time, it caused hair loss, skin ulcers, and worse. Combined with mercury-based lipsticks and removers, Elizabeth was exposing herself to a slow, silent death. Still, she wore it for decades, because the illusion was more than beauty, it was her throne. Every time she appeared before her people, they saw not a woman weakened by illness, but a queen untouched by time. A living myth. And myths don't bleed, they don't falter, they don't age. They don't age. Elizabeth had become a masterpiece of deception, one that required daily sacrifice. She would never again be just a woman. She had become a symbol. But symbols can rot from the inside out. By the height of her reign, Queen Elizabeth I wasn't just admired, she was mythologized. Paintings depicted her with moons and serpents, roses and rainbows, a queen untouched by age, unmarred by illness, immune to time itself. But behind the powdered mask, the truth was far more fragile. Venetian ceruse had become her second skin. Applied in thick layers, day after day, it hid her scars. But it also sealed her fate. The white lead mixed with vinegar clung to her skin, like armor, and seeped into her bloodstream like a slow-acting curse. The very product that preserved her image was destroying her from within. Symptoms of lead poisoning include skin damage, nerve deterioration, digestive issues, severe fatigue, hair loss, and ultimately, organ failure. It is likely Elizabeth experienced many of these, though publicly she never let it show. Adding to the danger, her beauty regimen included mercury-based rouges and pastes. Mercury, even more toxic than lead, can erode the skin, trigger tremors, damage internal organs, and corrode the mind. Historians now believe the combination of these elements created a daily ritual of self-destruction disguised as elegance. But Elizabeth couldn't stop. Her entire reign hinged on a delicate illusion that she was eternal, that the Virgin Queen did not wither, did not fade. To let the mask fall would be to show weakness, and weakness in the Tudor court was a death sentence, so she endured. Each morning her ladies-in-waiting would help apply the thick white paste across her face and neck, painting over pockmarks, sagging skin, and reality itself. The makeup reeked, a sour, acrid scent that clung to everything. It cracked, it flaked, it stung. But Elizabeth wore it like a crown. By her later years, the effects were undeniable. Her teeth blackened, her hair fell out in patches. Her skin, once fair, became brittle and inflamed beneath the layers. And still, she painted on. Because this wasn't just cosmetics, it was sovereignty. To the world, Elizabeth remained the radiant, unchanging monarch. But in private, her body told a different story. One of rot, decay, and daily sacrifice. She had preserved her image, but at the highest cost imaginable, her own health, her own flesh. Elizabeth I is remembered as the Virgin Queen, married to her country, untouched by romantic obligation. But the truth is far more complex. She may never have married, but she loved deeply and dangerously, and the men who entered her heart often exited in ruin. The first name whispered in the corners of every court was Robert Dudley. They had known each other since childhood, grew up together in the turbulent aftermath of Henry VIII's chaos. When Elizabeth became queen, Dudley was immediately elevated. She made him Master of the Horse, a title that granted him access to her private chambers at any hour. The court gossiped, the people speculated, foreign ambassadors reported they were lovers. But Dudley had one problem. He was already married. Then, in 1560, tragedy struck. His wife, Amy Robsart, was found dead at the bottom of a staircase, her neck broken. The official ruling? Accident. But rumors exploded. Was it suicide? Or had she been pushed? Whispers swirled that Dudley, or even Elizabeth, had arranged her death to clear the way for marriage. The scandal rocked the court. And though Elizabeth never distanced herself from Dudley emotionally, she never married him either. Perhaps she feared what it would cost. Perhaps she knew love could not come before duty. Or perhaps she simply didn't trust the institution that had destroyed her mother. Years passed. Suitors came and went. Kings, dukes, and princes. In 1579, a new contender emerged, Francois, Duke of Anjou, the younger brother of the King of France. He was 20 years her junior. Rumored to be eccentric, pockmarked, and politically inconvenient, and yet Elizabeth appeared smitten. She affectionately called him her frog. When he visited England, she publicly announced her intent to marry him. They exchanged rings. The court braced for a royal wedding. But the next day, the engagement was abruptly called off. It was the last time Elizabeth would ever come close to marrying. Then came the most dangerous romance of all, Robert Devereux, Earl of Essex, Dudley's stepson, a brash, beautiful man nearly half Elizabeth's age. When he entered court in 1589, Elizabeth was 56, Essex was 22. Their connection was undeniable, intense, theatrical, and volatile. She made him a favorite, showered him with titles, ignored his recklessness, but when he married in secret, Elizabeth was livid. She screamed, she wept, and he, desperate to win her back, wrote her poetry, lines dripping with devotion and regret. She forgave him, brought him back into favor, even gave him command of armies, but Essex was reckless with power. In 1599, she sent him to Ireland to crush a rebellion. Instead, he brokered a truce and returned unannounced, bursting into her chambers, dirty, disheveled, and catching her without her wig, her jewels, or her makeup. No man had ever seen her like that. The illusion shattered, the trust broke. She never recovered from that betrayal. In 1601, Essex launched a coup against her. He tried to seize London, force her hand, and claim power. It failed within hours. And this time Elizabeth didn't forgive. She signed his death warrant. He was beheaded on February 25, 1601. Privately, Elizabeth mourned him deeply. She sat alone in dark rooms, refused food, refused music. Her grief consumed her. Some say she died with his name still on her lips. By the turn of the 17th century, Elizabeth was no longer the vibrant queen of golden portraits and elaborate pageants. She was aging, alone, haunted by ghosts of the past. Her court grew quieter. Her closest friends and confidants had either died or drifted. The sparkle of her reign was fading, replaced by the dim, lingering weight of time. After Essex's execution in 1601, something in her changed permanently. She withdrew from court life, refusing public appearances. She stopped smiling. Her appetite vanished. And behind the palace walls, the woman who once commanded empires began to shrink into silence. In early 1603, tragedy struck again. Catherine. Carey, one of Elizabeth's dearest companions and most loyal attendants, passed away. Catherine had been more than a servant. She was family, a thread connecting Elizabeth to her mother's memory, her childhood, her humanity. Her death shattered the Queen. And then came the final days. Elizabeth refused to sleep. She believed if she lay down, she would never rise again. So she stood, sometimes for 15 hours straight, supported by cushions and surrounded by her ladies-in-waiting, who were helpless to stop her decline. Doctors were barred from examining her. She rejected all medical aid. Was it pride, fear, defiance? Perhaps all three. She who had survived betrayal, imprisonment, and assassination plots was now defeated not by her enemies, but by her own body. Witnesses described her as frail and gaunt, her skin paper-thin, her eyes dim. The elaborate costumes and powdered masks were gone. In their place stood a ghost of the Queen the world once worshipped. In her final moments she said very little, but one thing she did repeat again and again was a single name, Essex. Whether it was regret, longing, or punishment, we'll never know. On March 24, 1603, after a reign of 45 years, Queen Elizabeth I died at Richmond Palace. She was 69 years old, with her past not just a monarch but the end of the Tudor dynasty. No husband, no heir, no successor named, only a legacy wrapped in mystery and a silence as deep as the grave. With Queen Elizabeth Frinn's death, an era ended, but a riddle began. She left no children, no named heir, no final speech, but what she did leave behind was a letter. Found in her private chambers shortly after her death, it was unsigned, unsealed, unaddressed, just lying there, waiting. Her advisors, hardened men who had governed wars and outlived plagues, read it and fell silent. What they saw chilled them. Its contents have never been officially revealed. No copy survives, no public mention was ever made, but its existence is whispered in Tudor records, in court rumors, in footnotes of forgotten diaries. So what was in it? Some believe it was a confession, an acknowledgement that the very paint she wore for decades had poisoned her, that she knew, That she had traded her body to preserve her image, and the letter was her final truth. Others say it was a farewell, a rare glimpse into the heart of a woman who lived behind masks, whose solitude was not a performance, but a wound. A few believe it was political, that Elizabeth finally, privately named a successor, that in the final moments she broke her silence and revealed a plan no one expected. And then there are those who whisper that it was something darker, a revelation, a secret she had carried her whole life, something about her lineage, or the death of Amy Robsart, or even the true fate of Robert Dudley. A truth too dangerous for public eyes. Whatever it was never released. The letter vanished from history, swallowed by time, but its weight lingers because Elizabeth built her entire legacy on silence and strength. She outlived her enemies, outwitted her rivals, and outlasted expectation. She turned her life into legend, one carefully choreographed, painted in white, and protected by iron will. And yet, in the very end, perhaps she needed to speak. Perhaps that letter was the one place where Elizabeth Tudor stopped being queen and allowed herself to be human. And maybe, just maybe, it was there, in her own handwriting, that we would find her truest voice. Queen Elizabeth I reigned for 45 years. She survived assassins, suitors, scandals, and sieges. She brought stability to a kingdom in chaos and carved her name into history, not as someone's wife, not as someone's mother, but as England's monarch in her own right. She was the last Tudor, the daughter of a queen who was beheaded, the girl no one expected to rule, and yet she did. Under her leadership, England became a global power. The arts flourished. Shakespeare wrote his greatest works. The Spanish Armada was defeated. Her court became the center of a golden age. But her personal life, that remained her greatest mystery. She chose never to marry. She called herself the Virgin Queen, a title that served both her image and her politics. Yet she felt deeply, loved fiercely, and carried grief like a second skin. She was never just the queen in white paint and pearls. She was the child who watched her mother die, the young woman imprisoned in the Tower, the ruler who outlived every man who claimed to love her. And perhaps that's what makes her so unforgettable. She didn't simply wear a crown, she became it. Her life was a performance of perfection, flawless, commanding, iconic. But beneath the powder and the pageantry was a woman of fierce intelligence, immense pain, and impossible strength. The letter found after her death remains one of the great mysteries of royal history. Was it a confession, a final act of love? A revelation that could have changed everything. We may never know. The letter vanished, but its shadow lingers, because secrets always do. So now, the question is yours. What do you think was written in that final message? Was it a name, a warning, a memory, or the truth she never dared to say aloud? Tell us your theory in the comments. And if you love powerful, mysterious, and emotional stories from history, don't forget to like this video, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. We have so much more to uncover. Because history isn't just dates and names. It's heartbreak, it's triumph, it's secrets buried beneath crowns, and it's waiting for us to find.